You are listening to the third season of my podcast, which will be an English special this time, called the Money and Meaning Podcast. The idea stays the same. I'm going to interview all kinds of experts from different fields about the relationship between money and meaning, and also what lessons they've learned so far from life. Are you curious about how you can use money to become happier and live a more meaningful life? Then this podcast is really something for you. I am Emma Hafkamp, clinical psychologist, coach and yoga therapist, and founder of Lux. I help leaders to a lighter, happier life full of meaning and purpose. And for you, I host this podcast. I wish you a lot of inspiration. Welcome to the second episode of the Money and Meaning podcast, in which Andrew Manley is interviewed. Andrew worked for nearly 30 years for Shell. After Shell, he moved from the private to the public sector and even decided to change his career in a late stage to self-employment. He began to study psychology and has been writing his thesis about the transition of the so-called third life. What does he mean by that, and what themes appear to be important for late-stage career professionals who are making the transition away from a life of corporate employment? And what is his personal opinion about the relationship between money and meaning? Listen to this episode to hear his answers and more. All right, Andrew, so can you start with just shortly telling who you are and what you do for a job right now?
What I do for a job now is I'm a management consultant and an executive coach. But previously I worked in a multinational energy company and did a stint in central government. But as you can tell, at a certain age now, I'm enjoying perhaps my third career.
Yeah, so we will dive into that deeper a bit later. But can you also tell a little bit more about your other roles in life? So what do you do?
Well, I have a very sort of portfolio career at the moment. So apart from doing consultancy for a range of companies, as I say, I coach a number of senior executives in a very particular area, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Mm-hmm. And outside of those, I'm a very keen hill walker, sailor, and I'm at a stage where children are off my hands, but they occasionally reach out and need help, so that chews up a bit of time. Normally doing DIY and fixing flats that have gone
broken. So you're the handyman.
Something like that,
yeah. So you already said something about basically a career change, as you can say. Maybe you can take us very shortly through your life by telling about moments or events that have played a crucial role in your life and brought you actually at the place you're at now.
Yeah, I think when you talk about moments, I think most people talk about moments in two areas. I mean, one, personal moments, which typically are characterized by what I describe as births, deaths, and marriages. I mean, I think when people who are close to you die, that has a big impact, particularly if it's parents or close relatives. And I think that always causes a moment of life's reflection. I think the arrival of children is another point that people very typically highlight as being, life-changing.
And if you look at your own life, how was it life-changing for you then?
For me personally, well, my father died when I was in my teenage years, and that was quite a shock because he was only 50 years old when he died. And I think, as a late stage teenager, suddenly had to take on a lot of responsibility that, might have come at another stage. And so I think that was probably one of the most impactful moments in my own life.
Yeah.
But I think apart from the personal ones, I think professionally, careers are often rationalized after the event. I think people often describe their careers as a very rational, logical step of events.
Yeah.
And I look at my own career and I think, I often try and rationalize recognize it, but
Mm.
careers are often characterized by moments of opportunity or disconnect. In my own case, I trained as a research scientist and I discovered I hated it.
Mm.
So I often pursued a career, which when I look back on it, was largely characterized around my desire to travel around the world and see places.
Right.
And I look back and I often, characterize my career as a logical set of steps. No, it wasn't. It was largely around somebody said, hey, Andrew, here's a really interesting place to go and work. Or this is an interesting job because it takes you traveling around to different places. And so, I think back on that. But what led me to probably my current activities is just that moment when I was working as a fixed-term contractor, and the contract came to an end quite abruptly, and I suddenly thought, hang on, what do I want to do with myself now? So I think often moments of abrupt change are the most testing for people, and in my own life probably brought around the moments when I had to shift and do something different, whether it was in the personal sphere or in the professional sphere.
Yeah. So you're saying that the contract was ended quite abruptly, so you weren't expecting that? It
was coming to an end. I was working for central government. I had about 8 months on my contract left.
Mm-hmm.
And then a set of circumstances arose that led me to decide to resign probably 8 months early. And it was probably ahead of time, and it led to a sort of dislocation that I hadn't anticipated. And actually, I decided to go back to university. And so at a relatively late stage, I went back to university and studied an MSc in organizational psychology, which then led me off into what I describe as my third career.
Yeah. So can you, we will dive into that deeper a bit later, but I'm still curious what your life was like in the, you said you worked over 20 years, I think, with Shell, right?
Yeah, I worked for Shell for nearly 30 years.
30 years even, yeah.
And I had two very distinct phases of that career. I did 10 years in sales and marketing, and then was very fortunate that Shell paid for me to go through business school. And then I spent the next 20 years doing really sort of corporate restructuring. I got into a job that required a very significant restructuring of the company I was running. And after that, I sort of got known as somebody who fixed broken things.
Right.
And so increasingly got drawn into doing corporate restructuring, divestment, merger type activities, which was what actually sparked my initial interest in organizational psychology, because I was curious as to how you got teams and people to work well in often adverse environments, or environments even where their own jobs were on the line. And so that was what sparked my interest. So when I finally got to a point where I had a career dislocation of my own, I decided to go off and study it formally, because it had been observed by a number of consultants that I was quite good at it, but I didn't really know quite why I was good at it. So that was what took me in that direction.
And do you know a little bit more about what you did well then, now you've been studying it?
Yeah, I mean, I think psychology is a fascinating area of science, because we understand so little about what goes on, between people's two ears. And there are a huge number of different areas of psychology. I think probably one of my maxims is the more I've learned, the less I know, because you just realize that there are whole areas of psychology and science of which you have very little understanding. But to your specific point, do I understand more about what makes organizations tick? Yes, I probably do.
And can you share one or two insights about this organizational psychology, or maybe what, if you look back at it, what were maybe the biggest lessons learned dealing with the teams that had to restructure, for example?
I suppose two points may be worth sharing. I mean, one is that I became very fascinated in what's called motive theory. And motive theory actually stems from the point that psychologically, the motives for the reasons you do things are largely established by the time you're a late-age teenager. There's quite a lot of science behind that, but which is to do with brain formation. But actually, the reasons that people do things are largely established by the time they're in their late teenage years. So if you can understand something around their experiences in those formative years, you can, to a certain extent, predict how they're going to react in certain situations.
Yeah.
And that all stems from the work of a well-known psychologist, Abraham Maslow, and his hierarchy of needs. But there was a psychologist, a guy called David McClelland, who asked the question, which is, why, if people are fed, clothed, watered, sheltered, living in a safe society, do they bother to work 80, 100 hours a week? And McClelland developed a theory, the motive theory, and developed a way of testing people's motives to understand actually why are they doing what they're doing. So I got very interested in that, and I still believe that if you can do motive analysis, you can understand how people are going to are going to react in certain situations.
Yeah.
The other thing that I learned is that actually we know so little about the people we work with. If you can develop tools and mechanisms to actually get to know people far better than you normally would do, you actually can work with them a lot better. People talk about authenticity in the workplace, but actually we don't give people the opportunity to find out who are the authentic people they're working with. I've been quite surprised that in a number of teams I've worked in, people say, well, we're being open and honest and transparent with one another. But then you turn around to people and say, well, just tell me a few basic facts about the other people in the room. And they can't, because they know nothing about them.
No. So would you say if people know more about each other, that there's also more bonding or connection, and that will bring teams further?
Yeah, I don't think we all have to wear our hearts on our sleeve at work. I mean, I think there are boundaries to be struck here. And I mean, people don't necessarily want to come to work and share, all the details of their families and their lives and whatever else. But I think there are a set of facts about one another that it's worth kind of knowing, because I think it helps you understand, why people are doing the things that they're doing. I mean, I'll give you a case in point. If you lose a parent in teenage years, you typically strive to compensate for it. So often people who've lost parents while they're children will be seeking to compensate for that loss in the way that they behave. I managed a team of people where there seemed to be an awful lot of overachievement going on in the team. Well, once we unpicked a little bit about people in the team, and we found out that 5 of the people in that team had lost parents in teenage years, it was like a moment of revelation, because we suddenly understood why people were doing what they were doing.
Right.
It was only by asking the question that you found that out about the people in the room.
Yeah. So interesting, huh?
Yeah. So, it's as I say, I don't believe people should wear their hearts on their sleeve coming to work. But I think if you can at least understand the basics about people in the room. Another case in point, if you know somebody's got a very sick child, and you know that they're having to take time off in the day, but they're working like crazy at night, it's not because they're crazy about doing their job at night. It's just that they have to handle a very difficult real situation in their lives.
Yeah. So I guess then, I mean, I guess I can imagine that people who are listening now are thinking, yeah, okay, I do want to share more, or I do want to know more about my colleagues and what to share or what not to share or what to ask. Do you have a concrete advice or tip for that?
Well, there are some pretty good processes around for doing that. I mean, the most simple, which is just ask people to draw a timeline and highlight what were the highs and lows in their life to date, and just get them to describe them.
Yeah.
As I say, typically people, highlight the sort of marriages and births things as being highlights in their personal life, and they point to probably the deaths of close relatives as a low point. Well, even that is a sort of basic framework, but ask people to do it with their careers, and they'll often draw a line where they say, well, the high points were when I got appointed to new jobs or got promoted or got a big pay rise, and the low points were when they got fired or fell out with their colleagues. If they just talk through this, you get to understand something about the person in front of you that you might not otherwise have understood if you hadn't done it.
Yeah, beautiful. So let's go back to your life and career. So you said you made a transition basically to your third career by doing a new study, and I've read your thesis. Can you first maybe say what made you decide to transfer into this whole new study at this age, which is maybe a bit more unusual?
Well, firstly, I don't think it is unusual, because I think that with the fact that people are living so much longer than they were, so my parents' generation would have typically expected to retire around their late 50s, early 60s, and they would have died by the time they were 70. Well, now the average lifespan of a male in the United Kingdom and probably most of Northwest Europe is about 85 years. And for women, it's 87 years.
Yeah.
And up until the pandemic, the projection there would have suggested that 50% of the children born this year in Northwest Europe will live to be 100. Organizations are still tending to get rid of people in their 50s and 60s because, amongst other things, they're your most expensive employees. So suddenly people are finding themselves outside of institutional and organizational employers when they're in their sort of mid-50s, 60 at the latest. But they're faced with the fact that they get another 25 years of healthy life ahead of them before they probably have to face up to the inevitability of ill health, decrepitude, and ultimately death. So what are they going to do? Well, the ones that are very lucky may have enough funding and finance that they can pick and choose what they do. But even those people are intellectually curious. They want to do things.
Exactly.
So they have to find other things to do. Other people just don't have enough money. So they've not only got to find something to do, but they've got to find something to do which remunerates them. So it's got to be financially rewarded. So you've suddenly got this whole sort of phase of life and a group of people who are often described in slightly pejorative terms as golden oldies or silver foxes. But actually, they're people with huge experience and a lot to contribute. But for them, the challenge is how to do it. And so I sort of kind of stumbled into it because I found myself thinking, I'm late 50s, nobody will want to offer me a job, but I want to do things. So I sort of, that's what led me off into going back to university, and I indeed researched this phenomenon. And you're going to ask me, well, what did I find? Well, I found out three things. Firstly, nobody plans for it, and they don't plan early enough. So when people hear me talk about this now, I say that it's never too early to plan for this phase of your life, which is after you're going to leave organizational, institutional employment. You need to think about it, and it's never too early. The second thing is it's about rebalancing things. And the things you're going to rebalance are your personal portfolio, which I would loosely describe as your family, your home, your hobbies, your friends, and how you manage your health. And you have to think about how all those things are going to shift, because children will have left home, your relationship with your family shifts, you're going to have to look after yourself, your friends may or may not be important to you, and you've got to decide where you want to live. So that's the portfolio. There's then the question about money, and how much money do you need to furnish that portfolio?
Right.
And then you have to think about roles. So there's a whole sort of rebalancing thing that you have to think about. And then the question is, how do you get from A to B? And some people find that very, very difficult, because it's not just about planning it, it's actually how do you make it happen? And my experience is that people who are coming out of structured employment or structured environments haven't thought hard enough about what are the skills and what is it that they have to offer to people. And most importantly, how do you go and offer it? Because if you've been in a big institution and you're quite senior and you sit there and people come and ask for your time and you've got secretaries and assistants who do everything to you.
Right, yeah.
You're going to find yourself in an environment where nobody's going to come and talk to you.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what to come and ask you about anymore, because you're not in a big, position in an organization.
So would you say that it feels that you are losing your status, or maybe even part of your identity?
Absolutely. It's all a lot of it is around status and identity. And I mean, there are a number of books that have been written about the issues around status and identity and employment. But, you suddenly go from a position where you have many people working for you, dependent upon you. And I've just, funnily enough, been working with one of my coachees last week. And, he had 3,000 people reporting to him. And huge job. Never had to think about what he did with his time, because secretaries organized every 5 minutes of his day. And then when he leaves that organization, he walks into the kitchen on a 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, and who's the first person he's going to try and manage? Partner.
Yeah.
And what's the partner going to say? Go away.
Yeah.
I've managed for the last 35 years. I've managed a family. I've managed a home. I've managed, your laundry, your holiday, and I don't need you to come in here and sort me out.
Yeah.
But that person, it's very difficult, because they don't know who to go and talk to. They don't know what to go and talk about, or how to present themselves. Now, if they're very lucky, they might have managed the continuation through picking up some advisory role. But with a lot of them, that's a very, very scary moment. And so what you're trying to do is to help people think about what it is they offer, and how they go and talk to people. And it's a big shift for some people, because the first thing they have to learn is humility.
Yeah. So there are basically two tasks to learn to reflect really on yourself and what are your talents and your skills, basically. And the second one is more about networking, how to get in contact with people and how to create an environment where you can use those skills and talents and if necessary, ask money for it.
You're absolutely right. And the problem for most people is that the network that they have around a big role or a job is usually a network that belongs to the job and not to them as individuals. Right. So when they leave, people will continue to deal with their successor. They might be prepared to talk to you, but they're not going to offer you a role. So the trick, of course, is then how do you reach out through those people to the next level of your network, and then usually to a network that you don't even know exists. So what you've got to do is to help people almost rehearse how they talk to people. And in some cases, I literally help people write scripts. And a script may just be, what are you going to say in the first 30 seconds that you talk to somebody that actually then gives them the opportunity to start offering you some help or advice or pointers as to other people who might help you. And if I look at my own case today, I'm on the board of 5 different companies. I consult for another 2. And at any one time, I've probably got about 6 coachees who are being helped through that process.
Yeah.
But if I tell you that I don't know, I knew none of those 5 companies when I left my previous employment. They're all companies that I found through networking, talking to people, and then going and helping them do stuff. And they have come back and said, yeah, that's great, we want you to do a bit more. Or they say, oh, actually, you've helped us. We know somebody else who might help.
Yeah.
So it's that's all about building a network. But I mean, when I first started, I mean, you know, they say in English you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find a princess. Well, you do go around and you talk to people and you think, well, nothing's happening. I don't know why I've had that conversation. But actually, over a process of time, you know, doors open. And part of what I do now is helping people through that process, because it can be quite scary and you get a lot of rejections. You've got to help people handle rejection.
So, and how did you do that yourself then? Did you also get help, or did you do it all by yourself?
Trial and error, and actually going as I did back to university. I did 2 years at the University of London on a supposedly part-time basis, but it was about 16, 20 hours a week.
Wow.
I actually met a very helpful group of people who came from very diverse backgrounds themselves. And I just, you know, they were mutually very supportive of one another and of me. And I found that was helpful, because occasionally when you go on to a meeting with somebody and you thought, I've got high expectations about what's going to happen here, and you basically get the door slammed in your face and you think, oh, that wasn't so great. But you can go back and talk to other people and they say, yeah, but you should have thought about X or thought about Y, or, you know. So, yeah, but that's part of the whole process of moving across is build your team. And your team can be your partner. It can be a couple of good friends who know you from another walk of life. It can be a couple of ex-colleagues. And what I try to do is to help people think about who is the team that they can trust as they go through the transition.
Right. That they can talk to and share.
Early stages when things can go wrong.
Yeah. So, and I'm curious, because you said like this is important for people who are financially already like done, that they don't have to worry about their finances anymore. But it's also important for people who still need the job or a new set of activities to earn enough money for the rest of their life, basically. But do you see differences in either having enough money or not enough money in how people are dealing with this transition?
Well, that's why I said it's about balance, because, you know, to your question, what is enough money? And that, of course, is a very important part of thinking through those 3 things about your portfolio, the money, and the roles.
Yeah.
Because broadly speaking, everybody will say, I don't have enough money. Well, the question is what is enough? And if you think about it far enough in advance, you can plan to have enough. Because maybe you cull your personal portfolio. So classically, people who live in big houses where they brought up families will think about downsizing as a way of releasing money. So then they don't need so much. Other people say, no, I want to go out and buy a big boat or something. Well, you say, well, that's fine. But that means you've got to earn so much money every year to furnish that new hobby or whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah.
So then, but that then of course colours what it is you decide to do. I think the other point that's important about money is that giving your time for free is not necessarily the answer. So I've had people who've said to me, well, I want to do charity work.
Right.
But charitable work comes in different dimensions. So giving your time for free may not be the answer for some people. And charities and working in organizations where people give their time for free can be very frustrating if you've come out of an organization where it's very, for example, profit driven. So sometimes I say to people, well, if you want to work in a charitable manner, go and do it, but do it in a profit-driven environment, because that's where you will find people who you can identify with, and then give the money to charity. I've been surprised at that, but I've had experience of people who've come out of basically profit-driven organizations, and they go and work for charity, and they don't understand why nobody does what you ask them to do. Well, the reason is if people are giving their time for free, they'll give their time for free as long as they're enjoying themselves and doing what they want to do.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily going to respond to somebody walking in the door and saying, yes, well, I can make this charity very, very much more successful if we just all turn up to work on Monday morning at 9 o'clock, rather than rolling in on Tuesday afternoon for a cup of tea. And they go, yeah, but I don't want to come in on a Monday morning. I want to come in on a Tuesday afternoon. So go away, leave me alone.
Yeah. So would you say then the culture is really different when people are not paid for the things that they're doing?
Absolutely. And the culture can be different for many, many other different reasons. So I think one of the things about making these transitions is to ensure that you find yourself the culture that suits you.
Yeah. And I can imagine if people are having a career for years, like you had for nearly 30 years in Shell, that it can be quite hard to find out what makes your heart beat faster. What do you like? What is the culture that suits you? If you maybe only know one culture, what would you advise to people who are maybe at this stage or wanting to plan ahead, and how can you find out what you like or what suits you?
I think the answer to that is you have to go and ask people. I mean, I've been very fortunate. I'd worked for Shell, massive multinational company. I had then worked in central government for 5 years. And even going from the private sector to the public sector was a huge shock. I mean, I couldn't believe how different these cultures were. But I think for anybody else, my advice is go and ask people. And that's part of what networking is all about, is form an idea. So, for example, if you're in the private sector, and you think, well, I'd like to go and work in the public sector. Well, think about who are the people you know in the public sector, or ask friends if they have people working in the public sector, and say, can I come and talk to you for half an hour? Well, actually, if you give a good reason to people and you say, look, I'm Emma, I'm working in this sort of environment, but I'd like to understand your environment. People usually will give you half an hour of their time for free. Particularly if you've got a mutual connection who introduces you in the middle. Well, with a bit of luck, you might get an hour. But curious enough, I very rarely find that if you approach people with a good reason and you say, I'd like to come and talk to you because I'm thinking about moving in your direction or doing something similar to you, most times people will say yes. And actually, curious enough, particularly in this post-pandemic world where we're still all working, remotely, or we've all discovered how to work remotely, it's so much easier just to reach out to people. And I mean, people contact you and they say, hey, how did you make this transition? And I go, fine, let's have a Zoom for half an hour and I'll tell you.
Right.
And then, it's not difficult to network, provided you've got a good script and a reason to network.
Yeah. So you've been working in the private sector, then in the public sector. Now you're self-employed. So I mean, there's a lot to say about this, and maybe this is a too general question, but I'm curious if you can identify in which phase you were the most happiest.
I'm very, very fortunate. I look back over my career broadly with possible a couple of roles. I would say I've enjoyed myself massively. And actually, the two occasions I wasn't happy, I got out of it pretty damn quickly. Each role is different. I mean, you know, you're working in a large corporate, you're flashing around the world doing very exciting and challenging big projects. That's one thing. I think the public sector, certainly in this country, badly needs many of the skills from the private sector, but unfortunately engages them very badly. And so the private sector has a very bad reputation with central government here, because people talk about outsourcing, and outsourcing has been very badly managed. But you know, now I'm dealing with companies who want you to come in and roll up your sleeves. And I'm sitting in the offices of one of the companies I work for at the moment, and look at me, I've got my sleeves rolled up. Because if I walked in here in a big two-piece suit and a tie and all the rest of it, and said to people, you know, I'm here to manage everything, they go, just go away. Right. Today, I've sat through meetings with some dealing with some issues which in my Shell days I would have considered a bit sort of almost a bit trivial, but what you're doing here is helping people with very practical, very immediate issues, and they're very grateful that you do it for them, because you bring years of experience to bear when they haven't got it. Right. And it's huge fun. I love it, because they just, wow, we haven't thought about that. And you go, yeah, but just do this, do that, and the other. And it'll work. And they go away, and you see them the following week, and they say, you know what? You were right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if you ask me, you know, what's, you know, looking back, I mean, I've just had great fun. And what I'm very happy to say is I'm here in my mid-60s and I'm still having a lot of fun. And, you know, so long as my health holds up, it's great. And to the point, I don't have to work 5 days a week. If I want to take next week off, I can reorganize, well, not next week, but if I want to take a week in August off, I can reorganize my diary and go off and do something. And actually, then people may say, well, actually, we need you on a meeting on a Thursday. Well, that's fine. You join them by Zoom and you do your bit. So, you know, what's not to like about it?
So how what's your secret? How do you stay so happy and healthy so far?
Well, health is, of course, something that you can only manage to a point. And I think one of my advice to anybody at this stage, but it would be a commentary to anybody, even at your tender years, is stay healthy. I mean, take exercise, eat carefully, you know, do the evil things in moderation. So if you're going to drink or smoke, I mean, smoke, I wouldn't say don't do it, but drink, I mean, if you're going to have a beer or two, that's fine. But, you know, be careful with your health, because you only get it one time around.
Right.
There's, of course, an element of luck. I mean, I've had friends who've died quite young from, you know, cancer and those sorts of things. Well, you know, you can't mitigate for those things. If your number's called, your number's called. But look after yourself. And then I think the other thing is just the words you've used several times in this interview. Stay curious. If you're curious about things, I think that's half the secret, is just be curious and stay open and try new things out. And if things go wrong, learn from it, but don't take it personally. As I say, you know, I've been to talk to people thinking, yeah, I just know I can help you. This is going to be, and they go, no. Okay, fine, move on.
Right. Yeah. So what's actually the last thing you've been learning?
What have I been learning? Well, I learn new things all the time. I mean, I think in business, I always say business is around sort of really three things. It's around money. Well, nothing's changed about money, accounting, finance. It's still fundamentally the same stuff. It's about human relations and dealing with people. Well, there's nothing new in HR. I mean, it's as old as the hills. I mean, people are working in different patterns, but the fundamental issues around employing people or working with people haven't actually changed. The thing that's changed most dramatically, and if you ask me where do I learn most, it's about marketing and operations in business. Because in marketing, the whole intrusion of the internet was something that just didn't exist when I started out. And yet today, the internet and the capacity it brings you in the marketing sphere is beyond my wildest imagination. And it is moving so fast. It's changing by the second. So there is always something to learn in the marketing space. And I think in operations, operations has changed a lot. Big companies, supply chains are stretched internationally, and we're sourcing stuff just in time out of China or wherever it is. And for small businesses, the advent of off-the-shelf operational management systems has really changed how small businesses work. I'm sitting in a small business here that's in the telecom sector. Their whole operating system is on an off-the-shelf package that costs $20,000, and it allows them to scale up a relatively small business very quickly in terms of what they do. So that's where I think things have changed a lot, and that's where I'm hopelessly behind the curve, but I'm always trying to learn something.
Yeah, nice. So you've been researching the transition to the third career or third phase of the life, and you're living that. Do you have any dreams or any other ideas for other research or other coaching that you still have in mind for your own third career?
Well, I did research at the University of London, and I'm hoping to sort of publish that properly now. Mm-hmm. This sort of it's called the third phase. It actually comes from Hindu philosophy, where the Hindus identified this third phase that they call Vanashprada, which is the hermit phase. But actually, it's about being learned and sharing your learnings with other people. Mm-hmm. I researched it by doing in-depth interviews with quite a large number of people and looking at basically what the themes that they were presenting, which are the ones that I mentioned earlier on. I originally thought it was just about roles, and I thought it was largely about how you transition almost in a career sense. Mm-hmm. But what came out of it was a much wider set of issues. So I talked to you about portfolio, money, and roles. And I think the encouragement that I've had from people that I've talked to about it, and I've given talks about it, is to continue looking a little bit more widely at these other themes about the shifts in family relationships, mm-hmm. About the importance otherwise of friends and friendships. So if I was going to take it further, and I'm currently trying to decide whether I'm brave enough to do further research, mm-hmm. it would be to look at rather more widely at those issues. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I've still got about 400 pages of transcripted interviews, wow. which I need to go back and look at, because I've been encouraged to sort of look a bit further at what people were saying around those areas, and right. perhaps explore them a little bit more widely. Yeah. Because friendship, for example, is an interesting one, because I think particularly for men, the nature of friendship can shift quite dramatically as they get older. And I mean, anecdotally, people say, well, men are lousy at making friends. Well, I don't think they are. I just think that men have to exploit their friendships in a rather different way. Mm-hmm. But I think that may also be true of women as well. And so how the balance of friendship changes is maybe a whole area to still research.
Right. Yeah, beautiful. It reminds me of how I'm doing my trajectories with clients. I'm coming from a background where I was treating cancer patients not that you're at the end of life, but at the end phase of their lives. and they were reflecting with me on how they live their lives, and if their decisions and their daily activities were actually in line in what they find important. And that reminds me of that, when you are telling that when you are transitioning to a third career or third phase of your life, that's also again a moment where it's important to take the time to really reflect on what are your talents, but also what do you find important, and how can I experience the most meaning in life, and then set up the things that you need for that, a team and a network, in order to create that third career in a way that's important for you. And I would say it's not only for the third career important, but basically for your whole life. So maybe just make it into a yearly event, and reflect on how you're doing, and if it's still in place with what's important for you.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that the question, funnily enough, I gave a talk just recently in line with what you're discussing, where I basically, the question I've been asked to talk to was, how do you want to die? And of course, we don't necessarily get to choose the nature of our death. I mean, it can be very instantaneous, or it can be rather more protracted. But I think you're asking the right question, which is essentially, how do you want to be remembered? And I think if you hold that in your mind, particularly as you start to get through the latter stages of your life, I think it's really important. I mean, when people are quite young, it's difficult to talk to them about it, because life it's out there to live, and it seems like it's going on internally. But I think if you start to talk to people in the sort of 50s about, how would you like to be remembered, and how do you want to die? I think you're asking them almost the most important question of all, which is, what is it you want to live your last years or months being satisfied about? Because, you achieved those things that you thought you ought to set out to achieve. So in a way, what the question you're asking and the questions I'm asking are very related to one another.
Yeah.
And I think I often frame my questions in sort of a 10-year window, because I say to people, if you've got 15 or 20 years of healthy life to live, and you look back 20 years, and you think about the things that happened in the last 20 years, well, you've got that time again. What are the things that you don't want to miss out on? And it may be, learning certain things, studying certain things, helping other people in a certain way, relating to your family in a certain sort of way, being with your friends in a certain sort of way, because ultimately, life seems pointless. So you might as well get to the end of it feeling that you kind of filled in as much of the gaps as you possibly could.
Right.
But I think your point, for people who are terminally ill, that's really, it's very difficult, because their time to answer those questions is so accelerated.
Yeah, and that's what made me realize that it's so important to not wait for that moment, because it might come to you as well. You never know. So just be aware of the life that you're having and the health you're in right now, and make use of that.
Yeah, I mean, probably you and I both don't have an awful lot of time for people to sit around and say, oh, life's awful, blah, blah, blah. Well, the answer is, if life's awful, change it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's where, with some of my coachees, the ones I'm most in admiration of are the ones who've rocked out of corporate and institutional employment and said, this is the opportunity to do something different. And increasingly, actually, you're hearing stories. There's one of the national newspapers in the UK that is running stories about people who've taken the opportunity to say, actually, I really want to do something different.
Right.
Set up a business, do something fundamentally different. I don't count travel. Travel's an auxiliary that, I know people set off and say, oh, it's lovely to go off and travel. But to me, that's rather pointless. I think the people who say, actually, I'm going to go and write a book about South America, or I'm going to go and photograph bears in the Rockies, or I'm going to, go and learn a Middle Eastern language and travel while I do it. That to me has real substance to it, and I admire those people. But the ones who say, actually, you know what, I've worked in a big hospital all my life, really what I wanted to do was to run a bicycle repair shop, or set up a bakery, or distill gin in Scotland, and they go and do it. That's what life's about. Yeah. It's really about exploring the boundaries.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andrew, for this interview and your beautiful insights and tips for the listeners.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and thank you very much for having me. And I wish you well with your podcast, and I shall listen to them with great interest when you put them out.
Thank you very much.
Okay, pleasure.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode and you got inspired. Don't you want to miss any episode anymore? Then subscribe to the Money and Meaning podcast by clicking the follow or subscribe button. I would also really appreciate it if you could leave a review in the app you used to listen to this episode. Do you have the feeling that you also want to discover how you can lead a lighter, happier, healthier, and more meaningful life? Check out my offer on my website. You find the link in the show notes. I offer everything in English, and online is definitely an option. And who knows, we might meet each other soon.